All right, Ken Smyers, man, the hits keep coming. We've got our man Phi Zito on the line. For audience who might not know Kenny, introduce Phil, and man, can't wait to hear what he has to say, huh?
Oh, I'd love to, Eric. We have the one and only fearless Phi Zito, the owner, editor of Building Automation Monthly. And Phil is probably one of the smartest guys we know, one of the sharpest knives in the drawer. This guy, he can walk the walk, talk the talk. And as evidence of this, he has authored a book that I think is going to take a very big prominent position in the future of BAS. It starts out kind of like a BAS 101 manager's guide, a lot of smart stuff in there, and then he gets into the details that make or break a successful application, a successful building management system. Welcome to the show, Phil.
Welcome, Phil.
Hey,
Glad to have
thank you for
buddy.
having me. It's an honor to be here once again.
We appreciate you
very much.
Well, right off the bat, tell us about the book, and we're going to have a link on Controltrends where people can order it off of Controltrends if they want to. But give us the 411 on the book, man, and congratulations, by the way.
Well, thank you very much. So what I did was I reached out to the community, the BAM Nation, as I call them. I reached out to you, and you've been talking to your community as well, and found out that as far as building automation goes, there's kind of not a primer for building automation that touches on all the different aspects of building automation. It's very fragmented across the internet, and you can pick bits and pieces. So what I was looking to do is to capture all that information and then kind of crowdsource it through the 77 folks who got on board with me initially, and they've been reviewing the book as I've been writing it. Kenny's been one of those folks. And we've been going through, and as I would write a chapter, I would say, what questions did I not answer? And so I'd build those questions into the chapter and made it very conversational. So it starts at HVAC and works all the way at the end to systems integration. So it's broken into sections where you can have your primer of BAS, and then you move into how to build, procure, and then support a BAS, and then manage the BAS, and then advanced topics around integration, around upgrading, and around IoT and analytics. So it tries to prime folks for everything they may hear, whether they're a contractor, an owner, a technician, so that they can be involved in the conversation and not be at the mercy of whatever's being thrown in front of them. We were just talking before we hopped on the call about a new solution that's come out. And without a solid background in building automation systems, you can't evaluate solutions. And you guys do very well, but there's only two of you. So, there's so much stuff coming out right now. So how can you keep up with that without having a background? And that's what this book seeks to do, is build that solid base that the industry, I believe, at least needs.
Well, I tell you what, Phil, the fundamental your review of the fundamentals, I don't know if people are aware of how much resources and how much information you've made available to the community at large, the BAM Nation at large, and anybody else who wants to get interested. You've done some of the fundamental work on IT that I think is essential. Networking, you've done great stuff on cybersecurity. Tell us about this last thing on that the DDoS attack that brought down Twitter and Netflix.
Yeah. So, when I first heard that, I was like, crap, that's just what we need right now, because IoT is finally starting to catch on. It's starting to get some momentum. The vendors are starting to engage it, and they're getting less from the kind of foggy marketing speaking. They're actually putting products out there that can do it. And you guys have reviewed several of those products now. And the thing is I hear this, I'm like, crap, this is just going to set us back. But then you start to dig into it, and what it really was is that there was this malware out there that had these profiles of certain devices. And if you ever go and you search for a device using like a Shodan or a Census search engine, which Fred Gordy has been on your show and has went through as well. Well, if you search for those devices, they have specific signatures, right? And a signature is basically like your VIN number for your car. I heard you were talking about your Tesla in the previous episode. And, going and having that VIN number tells you everything about the car, right? Well, in this case, these devices, they have MAC addresses. They're their signatures. So this malware searches for these signatures, and these devices have default username and passwords. And this malware would try the default username and password. And if that worked, then it would take control of the device. So it wasn't necessarily a vulnerability with the device, and stuff is still coming out, and this information may change, but it was that folks left the default username and password on these devices, or they left kind of backdoor username and password in there. And then the malware was able to take those over. And then since everyone has high bandwidth uplinks coming out of their home to the internet, they essentially created what's called a botnet, which is a network of a bunch of devices that have malware on them. And they would all send these large packets up to this domain name service, right? So y'all still with me here?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So domain name service, what happens is if I go to google.com, www.google.com, and I try to hit that, my computer doesn't know how to get to that because my computer can't understand what google.com is, but it does understand Google's IP address. So the domain name server basically says this domain name, google.com, is this IP address. Well, what happened is they hit this domain name server that had the IP addresses for all of these sites, and it was seen as the authority domain name server. So when that server went down and folks couldn't hit that, they couldn't resolve the addresses. So if you'd known the address, you could have typed that in directly and hit the website. But because your computer by default can't keep every domain name's IP address on the internet, I mean, that'd be crazy. But what happened is that domain name server goes down, folks can't hit it, and then those sites are quote unquote down. So really the vulnerability was something you all have preached about, I've preached about, which is change your default username and passwords. If you're going to expose stuff to the internet, go and have timeouts on your passwords so that if someone hits it 3 times in a row, like in milliseconds like these malwares will do, then it shuts down that username and then you get an alert. But IoT devices, they're cheap devices. They're just sent out the door and folks don't think about it. I mean, when you get your cable box installed, you guys probably, I know I don't think about changing my username and password. And that's what happened.
Well, Phil, that's fascinating stuff. And, and I think we're hearing so much, because you come from the building automation side like we do. And as building automation people, we're inundated with IoT, and sort of, conceptually you can kind of understand that, but understanding it vis-a-vis building automation controls. It seems like you're coming up with a new book or a new podcast series or a new course, aren't you, to address that? Speak about that if you would.
Yeah. So the book, right? The book's going to talk about building automation systems. And then, I've got a slew of ideas. After the book, I'm going to be coming up with a couple different courses around IT for BAS professionals. That's something you guys hit on in episode 201 was just the need for technology and information for the new folks in the industry. And that's the big gap that's going to hit. When pneumatics to DDC happened, there was a huge gap. Folks didn't take that seriously. And I'm seeing the same thing right now. Folks are kind of siloed between these younger folks and these kind of older folks. And it's not an age thing that determines whether someone takes IT seriously. It's just their kind of perspective. Some folks are taking it seriously and they're learning it. Others aren't. And I think right after the book will give a solid primer on everything, right? But then the IT course will take that to the next level for folks who actually want to learn practical IT for building automation systems. And this would apply to folks who need that information.
That's awesome. I'll tell you what, Phil, again, we could ask you 1,000 questions. By the way, there was an article. It's if people want to really get down deep, like you gave us the background to it, that it's ARS Technica. The botnet of things malware is getting a nasty makeover. That goes into the detail that you were talking about, the granular level that might elude people if they're not familiar with some of the esoteric dialogue. But we are being hit with so much disruptive technology on different levels coming out from different people, different players, different drivers in our BAS and building management market. We have another player coming out called Candy, Candi. And we also have Optergy that's coming into the game. So we're seeing a lot of really interesting, intelligent, deep-pocketed players now. Tell us about Candy and what your thoughts are and what the likely impact to our industry is going to be.
Yeah. So I think Candy ultimately is going to be a positive impact as far as I could tell, because it's going to allow us to have exposure to a lot of the IoT protocols. However, they don't have a complete protocol list, and I noticed some things are missing on their site. So I'm actually going to order a device dig into it, see what it can actually do. But basically, it's like a field server or a DG box on steroids, as I can understand it. And it essentially takes all these different protocols, normalizes the protocols. And what that means is it makes them a common language. And then it has an API that you can use to either feed information to, analytics, single graphical user interfaces, or you can go and actually pull that API from those. Now, what do I think it's going to do for the industry? I don't think it's going to be a BAS killer. And I know there's been some concern about that. What I think, because here's the deal. So you go on a job, right? And you guys know this, but you go on a job and you get this fancy sequence of operations from an engineer, right? And it's different for every engineer. They all have their own nuances. I had this one where they wanted to pull humid outdoor air to actually dehumidify the air by making it hit a cooling coil. And that didn't make logical sense to me because psychometric chart, you follow that kind of math doesn't work. Humid air to dehumidify. But it's when you have those kind of things, that's something an IoT gateway can't solve. That's where a BAS guy's got to get in and write programming. And you can't create enough sequences for every possible outcome. So where I think this will play well is with like smart equipment, the digital ceiling that's mainly using CoAP protocols, a lot of the different systems out right now. I think it'll be good for that, for converging technology, but folks still need to go and create the things that happen. So I really think that the BAS tech of the future is going to be less of the guy who uses the question and answer control configuration tool or whatever tool you're using. I think it's going to be more of the guy who has to understand the different data models and make them match up. So this tool, if anything, this product, if anything, is going to force us to get more comfortable with IT, in my opinion. But I'll know more in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and to me, Phil, my question would be, it definitely wouldn't replace, obviously, like you or Johnson guy, the HVAC pro programming the controllers wouldn't replace the controllers. I don't get that. But from an architectural standpoint, do you see that being something that's laid over the top of, say, a JACE or an NAE, or do you see it possibly that they could? Do you think they're trying to position to replace that, or be a layer on top of?
Well, honestly, in 5 years from now, and I don't have any secret information, and so this isn't anything proprietary or secret knowledge, but I mean, 5 years from now, I would be shocked if we still had JACEs and NAEs. I mean, with the controllers, with Moore's Law, and you guys talked about this as well. Hey, I'm referencing a lot of your episodes here.
Thanks, Phil.
We call it Zito's Law.
So, but
ooh, that's a good one there. Zito's Law. Nice.
Oh, well, I don't know about that, but I think this guy named Moore came out with it, where the computing cycle keeps getting – it basically doubles at every certain amount of time. Well, that's applying to field controllers right now, right? So you're going to have all this smart in the field controllers, and you're either going to have the fog architecture or you're going to have the cloud architecture. Fog is all the intercommunication. Well, I think that all of that is going to force a lot of the JACEs and the supervisory devices to either get pushed down into the controllers or get virtualized into either a cloud server or a rack server or into a edge or a gateway. So what I think this will do, I think this will just be another gateway. And maybe I'll draw up an architecture map to kind of visualize, and I'll send it to you guys, and you guys can post it. But I think that this is just going to be another gateway to help consume data. I don't think this would ever replace a JACE because, one, I don't think Candy probably wants to get into the business of trying to replace JACEs and NEs. I mean, there's a lot more to them. But also, it's just that JACEs and NEs, they do specific things. Like they do certain trends and they do interlocks and they do global level logic. And I don't think these folks probably want to get into that world because we've seen other IT groups try to do that in the past and then get smacked pretty hard with the reality of what that all takes. And I think folks have learned from that.
Gotcha. Well, Phil, I think that we've got to talk about what you have in the next immediate future. When you're doing all these projects and everything, how do you prioritize? What's the next most important thing for the BAM Nation?
Geez, so how do I prioritize? That is so difficult because I've got ADD and it's like squirrel, squirrel, squirrel. So I actually sent out a message to my Facebook group today, and I was like, guys, I think I'm going to stop talking about HVAC, and I think I'm going to start talking about IT, BAS, integration, and BAS kind of sales strategy, because those are the things that I'm passionate about. And I'm going to kind of feel out which one of those is the most natural. I'm gravitating towards BAS, IT kind of things because I feel that that's kind of a space I'm really good at. And so I'm thinking that that's probably going to be the next thing is I do a IT course for BAS professionals and then an IT course for sales professionals, kind of two different levels. So that's kind of awesome. 2017. But who knows? Something may happen.
Well, very, very cool, Phil. Well, listen, you do so much for the community. And again, Kenny and I are very, very big fans of yours. Speak about the podcast. We've referenced the BAM Nation. For somebody who might not know what that is, explain what the BAM Nation is. Talk about your podcast. Talk about how they can get a hold of you. You're real good at keeping people up to date on what you're up to. Give us the 411 on Phil Zito and the BAM Nation.
Yeah, thanks. So I'll try not to deluge folks with URLs. The easiest thing to do is to just go to buildingautomation.com/subscribe, and then you're on the email list, and I push out all the information. But to your point, you guys do such a great job with the video cast and the podcast. And I've tried the video casting. I can't do the same quality that you guys do. It's just not my natural thing. But the podcasting, I've been pushing out a lot more episodes, trying to keep them below 20 minutes for folks' attention span. So I talk about technical things. I talk about integration, information technology. As far as the blog goes, I'm still pushing that along. And I'm everywhere, LinkedIn, Facebook. My big thing is just to get feedback from the industry as to what they need. And then folks like yourself do so awesome on products and on educating around news and what's going on as the industry. I feel that my niche is around technology and design and implementation. And that's something I've got a lot of real world experience that I can share. And I think a rising tide floats all ships, raises all boats. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now.
Well said, Phil. Well said. Well, listen, I want to put you on the spot one more time. Now, you cannot answer with the Johnson product, okay? Because I know that it would be a Johnson answer, right? But as you know, we got the Controltrends Awards coming up. We got the nomination ballots out. And where we find out about new technologies and new products and things like that is there's a category called Other, and people write in other solutions. And that's how we found out a lot about the new technology. So with your background, Phil, and again, I know it cannot be a Johnson product because I know you would answer with a Johnson product because Johnson makes the best products. But has there been a technology or a product that is just a new technology or a new product that's just wowed you this year?
Yeah. So how do I answer that without getting myself fired?
Well, okay. I mean, outside of Johnson, because obviously Johnson is the number one wow factor. But is there sort of a Me Too that sort of maybe comes close to Johnson?
Let me tell you something that folks probably aren't thinking about or probably don't have their eyes on, but something that I've been really impressed with. And there's actually two. So the first thing I've been pretty impressed with is the Azure IoT gateway. And this is probably a little more software and coding than some of your audience is probably familiar with. But Azure is this cloud-based solution that a lot of folks either build their stuff on Amazon Web Services or they build their stuff on Azure. Like this videocast and podcast at the end of the day probably sits in an Amazon web server somewhere, and that's where folks are accessing from. Well, the Azure IoT gateway, it has a lot of really cool ways to consume data, and then it's got a really solid data analytics engine. So if you've got a little bit of a software background, it's super cheap to set up, and it's really awesome. Now, as far as a product goes that I've been really, really impressed with, well, I would say, up until they went to Acuity, I was really fond of the DGBox platform. I don't know what's going to happen to them now that they're with Acuity, but I really liked how they had an HTTP GET subscriber and listener, and basically HTTP is how the internet speaks. And you could literally put in a URL of another IT system and pull that data. So that was really cool. I don't know what their future is, though, guys. I don't know.
We're not sure
I'd be
either.
very interested.
Yeah, that's good.
So those are kind of two that aren't BAS products, but can support BAS products that folks don't think about too often.
Now we're going to really get you in trouble
Awesome.
now. Okay, you ready?
Sure, go ahead.
I know how awesome your wife is, but we have a new category called
Phil, take the fifth. Take the fifth.
Controltrends Woman of the Year. Is there a woman in the industry that just blows you away and impresses you? I'm sure there are a lot of them, but there's one in particular.
So it's funny that you bring that up, and it's someone that her name would probably never come out if I didn't say it right here. But there's a project development engineer that I work with at Johnson Controls, and she's in the West region, and her name is Arlene Mendoza. And her name would probably never get out, but she's been at all the IoT conferences. She's been talking to some major Silicon Valley companies about implementing technology in their buildings during the construction process.
Wow.
And I mean, she was involved in some major airports where they were talking about how do we do real-time APIs to taxi companies and stuff. And I can't go any deeper than that because of NDA, but she's been really involved in that. And she's young.
So should we write her in for you as a Phil Zito nominee?
Well, I was actually going to go fill out your form, which you guys should be doing, by the way.
Yep.
You guys should be going to controltrends.org and filling out the Control Trend Awards.
You heard it from Fearless Phil Zito. That's great. Arlene is great. Phil, thank you so much, buddy. Appreciate you taking a few minutes to speak with us. Let's get you on in about 4 or 5 weeks. In the meantime, go to BAM Nation, Building Automation Controls Monthly. Check out Phil. Check his podcast out. Check all his stuff out because Phil's got a lot to check out, man, and he is the man. Phil, thanks again, buddy.
I got one more thing for you.
Okay.
If we're still on.
We are.
For your nation, for your what do you call your folks?
Control Trends community.
Control Trends community. There you go.
That's what Ken Sinclair calls them, right?
I like trendies. So I went and did buildingautomationmonthly.com/talk, and they can get 10% off of the book. Just
nice.
Go right there. It takes them to the sales page. They can read the table of contents, and if they feel that's something that would help them, I encourage them to try it out.